Let's talk about focus because it's more than spinning only a ring on the lens. I will explain to you what a focus is and when you can use it creatively. Focus means you can control which part of an image is sharp. That means from very close to the camera to infinity, very far from the camera. How much depth is in focus can be changed with different factors. The depth of field means the deepness of the focus plane from close to infinity. This is also what gives you a blurry background. A small depth of field is when you only have a small plane in the distance in focus. A higher depth of field means a deeper plane of focus. That gives you also a very sharp background or foreground. Now I will tell you a short summary of what factors influences the depth of field. Later in the course you will get a separate video that covers this topic more detailed. The aperture is one of them that affects your depth of field in the focus. If your aperture is open, you will get more light through your lens, which makes your image brighter and blurrier. This means you get a small field of depth, which also becomes trickier to manual focus. If you close your aperture, you get less light and a sharper background or foreground. That means you will get a higher depth of field. So it's easier to focus manually, but you will lose this lovely blurry background. But we go into the aperture in another video to give you more information about this topic. Also important to know is the closer the focused subject is to the camera, the smaller the depth of field gets. The further away the focused subject is to the camera, the deeper the depth of field gets. The last point that affects the depth of field is the focal length itself. The longer the lens, the smaller the depth of field. The wider the lens, the bigger the depth of field gets. But more about the focal length you will learn as well in a separate video. Now back to the focus. With the most modern cameras and lenses, you can choose whether to pull the focus manually or automatically. Both options have advantages and disadvantages. With manual lenses, you have to struggle more to get your subject perfectly in focus, especially if you use the camera on a gimbal, handheld, and by yourself. This requires some skills that you only get with routine. The second option is to use a second operator that takes the focus for you, a focus puller. In that case, if it is a skilled person, you can get very smooth focus transitions, maybe smoother than with autofocus in some cases. But in the newest cameras, also in cinema cameras, you get a very reliable autofocus system that tracks what you want in focus so you don't have to care about it, and it makes your life easier, especially when you are a one-man band. Usually you can use the autofocus lenses manual as well. There are two different technologies. The first one is that when you use autofocus lenses in the manual mode, you can focus through mechanics that actually drive the lens elements inside the lens. This is more accurate and has a more direct feeling to it. The other technology is the focus fly-by-wire system, which means when you turn the focus ring, there are no direct mechanics that drive the lenses in it. Electronics inside the lens recognize that you turned the focus ring and some motors inside the lens move the lens elements. This gives you maybe a feeling of delay, but also this technology works now very well today. Now, have you ever heard of focus breathing? That means if the picture looks like you zoom in and out while you are focusing from close to infinity. That brings me to the next topic, the difference between photo lenses and high-end cinema lenses. With most photo lenses on video cameras, you have the problem with focus breathing. Most filmmakers don't like this effect in focus pulls. A photographer doesn't care if the picture is breathing while they are focusing because they want only one shot in focus. But a filmmaker wants to capture a whole focus pull. Here are some examples. With higher-end cine lenses you don't have this problem. They are created this way that the lens doesn't show this effect. But to handle this it needs way more work to produce such a lens and gets way more expensive to rent or buy it. In some Sony cameras they add a feature that is called breathing compensation. The camera compensates for this effect digitally and it works very well. By the way, the Sony G-Master lenses are not cheap, but the focus breathing is very bad in these lenses. This feature solves this problem. The only downside is that you get a slight crop if you use it. Newer photo lenses are mainly featured with autofocus system, while cine lenses are designed for manual use only and are featured with gears to focus manual through a follow focus system. You have also hard stops when you reach close or infinity focus, and the aperture has no clicks like in a photo lens. You can change it very seamlessly. Cine lenses have also longer focus throw, which makes it easier to keep your subject perfectly in focus. But how can you keep your subject in focus by yourself with the manual lens? Firstly, with the glide cam or a gimbal, you can set the focus, hold or maintain the distance to your subject. Track it sideways or follow the subject, toward or away from you. I use this method all the time and get perfect results. Trick is only that the camera operator and the talent should stay at the same distance. The second way is when you pull the focus manual on a tripod or handheld. It will take more time to get it perfectly in focus. The next one is to set your focus and let someone walk from autofocus into the focus. Set markers on the ground to make it easier for the talent. Lastly, use a high aperture. That will give you less depth but a deeper plane of focus, which is easier to keep your subject in focus, especially for complex gimbal movements. It's not a big problem when everything is focused the whole time perfectly, but it has some more critical situations when there are autofocus that's really not what you want. I understand the scenario very well. You can use a tool called focus peaking to make it easier to check what is in focus. Activate it if your camera has this function or use it with an external monitor that has this function. Positive is also that the picture you see on the monitor is more prominent than on a camera screen. While you are on the gimbal, pulling focus with your hands is impossible, so you introduce some shake in your clip. For that case, you can mount the follow focus system and use that. I use the Tilta Nucleus Nano with the handle to pull the focus quickly by myself. The other way is to use a second operator. In this case, you also need more gear, which is the more expensive option to handle the focus. This is absolutely not an option for every shoot or client. What you need is the follow focus, a second external monitor and an image transmission system. We use the Tilta Nucleus Nano with the second monitor and the Holyland Cosmos 600. This way you can concentrate on the framing while the second operator concentrates on the focus. This is required when you need to use some cine lenses that are designed for this. Sometimes I try to focus cine lenses by myself with the focus motor. It's tricky but doable. The cheaper way is to use the camera with a shoulder rig or a tripod, so you can use a non-electronic follow focus. This works not with every kind of stabilization. On a gimbal or a glide cam you will introduce some shake if you pull the focus this way. But autofocus is the best way to track moving subjects these days. So let's take a closer look to the autofocus. It exists different ways to set it up. Mostly you can change the autofocus area and the speed of the focus. First, talk about the areas. If you have a wide scene or establishing shot, you can set the area to wide, so that the most of the image is in focus. But the wide area can also mess up your shot, especially when the camera's face detection is turned off or you don't see a face in the shot. So it isn't always the best option to use, because the camera don't know exactly which object you want in focus. The area field or spot is suitable for scenarios if you know that you want only to focus on this area and nothing else. The spot is also perfect when the camera's face detection is not turned on or you see only the backside of the person and you know that the subject will stay in the spot you set the focus field to. The setting field I use mostly when the subject is bigger in the frame and don't leave this focus field. It can be helpful that the focus don't switch to a foreground object. In an interview you can use a spot, but if you interview a person who is nervous and goes in and out, the camera can no longer see his face in the spot, and the focus will shift to the background. In this case you are better with the field areas or if you have a face only or tracking mode. For product shots, when you use a spot to get the exact spot in focus, the spot areas are very handy. With the newer Sony cameras you can track a spot when you click on it, so the camera will track that object while it's moving. Also, when you have a lot of foreground objects in the frame, the camera will stick to the marked object most of the time very well. This is a very great function, especially when you don't see the face of an actor. These tracking points hold even better up when you click on a point with a lot of contrast in it. And if you have more than only one person in the shot, the face detection doesn't really know which person should be in focus. Therefore, the best way is to use this tracking option. Next, you can set up the speed and sensitivity of your focus. Setting it to fast might be helpful for some fast action shots. It can happen that the camera doesn't exactly know what you want in focus, so it changes quickly to the false subject. Or you can achieve a very smooth focus transition when you change the speed to low. For natural looking focus transitions, I use a speed around 2 to 5 on my Sony cameras to get the best results, but it depends on the exact situation. If you see a lot of hunting, especially in macro push in or pull out shots, try to set the speed to the lowest possible setting. Sometimes you have to play with it to get the best results, or take the focus manually. And if you shoot in slow motion and you leave it at a slower setting, the focus transition itself also gets slowed down, which can look too slow. In such cases, I set it to fast to get a smoother looking focus transition. The last option is the focus subject shift sensitivity. A lower number means it's locked on, and a higher number means it reacts faster to a new object. It tells the camera how fast the focus change to the new object should be initiated. As an example, you want to film a subject and some foreground object passes your talent during the movement. This can ruin your shot, because the camera detects a new object and switches the focus to it. If you turn the shift sensitivity to low, it will lock on your subject, so the focus doesn't get distracted from a short passing object in front of your subject. Even if I use Sony cameras, everything in this video can be applied to every other brand of camera. But it can be that not every camera has all the same functions as the Sony cameras. And now let's learn how to use your focus creatively. Focus pulls to reveal something can create tension. Someone walks into focus. Something sharp goes out of focus. Set the focus to a fixed position, push in and show different things. Play with the depth of field when you want to see that everything is sharp, maybe in an establishing shot. When you want to see a blurry background, maybe when you want to show someone's doubts or inner feelings. Here we have endless options. We can follow someone's doubts with the focus, or even more. There are no limits. That's all you have to know and understand about the focus for now, so let's dive deeper into how a camera works. Let's create.